Hello, and welcome back to Family Secrets Unveiled. There are some stories that cling to you, whispering in the quiet hours, tales of shadows and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Today, we delve into one such narrative, a chilling mosaic of love, loss, and the unsettling truth that sometimes the most impenetrable locks are those we ourselves forge. It's a story not of grand gestures or heroic acts, but of the slow, insidious unraveling of a life, a quiet tragedy played out behind closed doors, culminating in a mystery that defied logic and shattered a family. Imagine a world where everything you believed was solid, was true, suddenly becomes a shimmering mirage, and the person you trusted most holds the key to a darkness you never knew existed. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper of domestic bliss, a seemingly idyllic tableau in the heart of suburban America. Eleanor Vance, a woman whose laugh was as bright and clear as the summer sky, had found her perfect match in Arthur Vance. Arthur, with his kind eyes and gentle demeanor, was everything Eleanor had ever dreamed of. He was a successful architect, his hands capable of building grand structures, yet equally adept at fixing a leaky faucet or tending to Eleanor's prize-winning roses. Their home, a charming Victorian with a wraparound porch and a sprawling garden, was a testament to their shared dreams and meticulous care. They had met later in life, both having navigated their own share of life's turbulent waters, and their union felt like a calm harbor after a storm. Eleanor, a talented librarian with a passion for classic literature, often joked that Arthur was her real-life Darcy, a man of quiet strength and profound integrity. They had no children, a choice they had made together, content in each other's company, their lives interwoven with shared hobbies, lively dinner parties with friends, and quiet evenings spent reading by the fireplace. But beneath this veneer of perfection, a subtle current of unease began to ripple, almost imperceptibly at first. It started with small things, easily dismissed as quirks or forgetfulness. Arthur, always so precise, would occasionally leave important papers in odd places, or forget an appointment that Eleanor had meticulously reminded him of. Eleanor, ever the supportive wife, would gently chide him, attributing it to the stresses of his demanding job. Then came the headaches, fierce and debilitating, forcing Arthur to retreat to the quiet solitude of their study. He would emerge pale and drawn, but always with a reassuring smile, brushing off Eleanor's concern with promises of rest and recovery. Eleanor, with her empathetic nature, would brew him herbal teas and ensure the house was quiet, convinced that his well-being was paramount. Yet, there was something else, something less tangible but far more unsettling. Arthur began spending an increasing amount of time in their attic, a space previously used only for storage of holiday decorations and old photo albums. He claimed he was organizing, categorizing old blueprints, or simply seeking a quiet refuge from the world. Eleanor, initially pleased that he had found a new hobby, soon noticed a shift in his demeanor after these attic excursions. He would return almost different. A subtle tension in his shoulders, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, a guardedness that was entirely new. He would sometimes be lost in thought, his gaze distant, and when Eleanor would try to engage him, he would often respond with a vague answer or an abrupt change of subject. It was as if a part of him remained upstairs, hidden amongst the dust and forgotten treasures. One afternoon, a particularly hot and humid day, Eleanor decided to surprise Arthur with a pitcher of iced tea while he was in the attic. As she ascended the narrow, creaking stairs, a faint, almost imperceptible humming sound reached her ears, a low, rhythmic thrum that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. It was an odd sound, not mechanical, but almost melodic, yet deeply unsettling. When she reached the top, the attic door, usually ajar, was firmly closed. She knocked gently, calling out Arthur's name, but there was no response. A sudden, inexplicable chill ran down her spine, despite the oppressive heat. She knocked again, louder this time, her heart beginning to beat a little faster. Still nothing. A prickle of unease turned into a genuine concern. Had he fallen? Was he all right? Arthur, she called out, her voice a little strained now. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, she heard a fumbling sound from within, followed by the distinctive click of a lock turning. The door creaked open, and Arthur stood there, his hair slightly disheveled, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat. His face was pale, and his eyes, usually so warm, held a strange, almost vacant quality. He looked at her, then past her as if seeing something she couldn't. "Eleanor," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "Is everything all right?" His question sounded more like a challenge than a concern. Eleanor, bewildered by his sudden appearance and the locked door, could only stammer, I brought you some tea. I heard a noise." Arthur's gaze hardened for a fleeting moment, then softened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, the tea, how thoughtful," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I was just working on something important." He gestured vaguely into the shadowy depths of the attic, but Eleanor couldn't discern anything specific. The humming sound had stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. He took the tea, and as he did, Eleanor noticed a faint, almost metallic smell emanating from the attic, a scent she couldn't quite place, but one that left a lingering, unpleasant taste in her mouth. As he retreated back into the attic, closing the door behind him with a decisive click that didn't quite sound like a lock, Eleanor was left standing on the landing, the pitcher of tea still in her hand, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. The attic door, which had been locked from the inside, now seemed to hold more than just forgotten memories. It held a secret, a nascent darkness that was just beginning to stir. The incident with the attic door lingered in Eleanor's mind, a discordant note in the symphony of their seemingly perfect life. She tried to dismiss it, to rationalize Arthur's odd behavior as the natural eccentricity of a brilliant mind preoccupied with complex projects. But the unease persisted, a tiny, persistent thorn in her side. The metallic smell, the distant look in his eyes, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand when he took the tea, these details gnawed at her, refusing to be relegated to the realm of mere coincidence. Their once effortless conversations now felt stilted, punctuated by silences that stretched taut with unspoken questions. Arthur's retreats to the attic became more frequent, and each time he emerged, a subtle shift in his aura became more pronounced. It was as if a part of him was slowly being consumed by whatever lay hidden beyond that locked door. One evening, during their usual quiet time, Eleanor, driven by a growing sense of desperation, attempted to broach the subject again. "Arthur," she began, her voice softer than she intended, "you've been spending so much time upstairs lately. Is everything all right? Is there something bothering you?" Arthur, who had been engrossed in a book, slowly lowered it, his gaze meeting hers. For a moment, she saw a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Fear? Resignation? Before it was swiftly replaced by his usual placid expression. "Eleanor, my dear," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I appreciate your concern. It's merely some old family documents I'm sorting through. Nothing for you to worry your beautiful head about." He smiled, a practiced, reassuring smile, but it felt hollow to Eleanor. The dismissal, though polite, was absolute. It was a clear boundary, a silent declaration that this was his domain, his secret, and she was not to trespass. But Eleanor, with her librarian's keen eye for detail and an innate curiosity that had served her well in deciphering the mysteries of ancient texts, was not easily deterred. She started paying closer attention, observing Arthur with a newfound intensity. She noticed small things, faint scratches on the attic door frame that hadn't been there before, almost imperceptible smudges of what looked like rust on the sleeves of his shirts, and a curious habit he developed of checking his watch frequently, even when he had nowhere to be. He also became increasingly secretive about his work, often taking calls in hushed tones in the study, or hastily closing his laptop when she entered the room. The architect, once so open about his creations, now cloaked his daily life in a veil of guarded privacy. One particularly rainy Tuesday, Arthur announced he had to attend an impromptu meeting downtown. Eleanor, feigning a headache, waved him off with a kiss, then watched from the window as his car pulled out of the driveway. The moment she heard the garage door close, A surge of adrenaline coursed through her. This was her chance. With trembling hands, she made her way to the attic stairs. The familiar creak of the old would seem to echo her own racing heartbeat. When she reached the landing, she examined the door. It was indeed locked, just as she suspected. But this time, she noticed something else. Tucked discreetly into the crack between the door and the frame, almost invisible to the naked eye, was a tiny, almost transparent piece of fishing line. A rudimentary but effective tripwire. Arthur wasn't just locking the door, he was actively ensuring no one entered in his absence, and he was taking precautions to know if someone had tried. A cold knot of fear tightened in her chest. This wasn't about old documents or architectural blueprints. This was about something far more sinister. Eleanor, a woman who had never picked a lock in her life, suddenly found herself consumed by an urgent need to bypass this barrier. Her mind raced, sifting through memories of old mystery novels, searching for a solution. She remembered a passage, a clever trick involving a thin piece of plastic. Rummaging through her purse, she found an expired library card, its edges smooth and sturdy. With a deep breath, she slid it into the gap between the door and the frame, wiggling it gently, trying to feel for the latch. It took several agonizing minutes, her fingers aching, sweat beading on her forehead, but then, with a soft click, the lock gave way. The door swung inward with a groan, revealing a scene that made Eleanor's blood run cold. The attic, once a jumble of forgotten treasures, was now meticulously organized, almost sterile. But it wasn't the order that shocked her, it was what filled the space. Gone were the dusty boxes of holiday decorations and old photo albums. In their place stood an array of strange, custom-built machinery, gleaming metallic objects with intricate wiring and digital displays. The air hummed with a low, barely perceptible vibration, a ghost of the sound she had heard before. On a workbench in the center of the room, illuminated by a single bare bulb, lay a series of meticulously arranged tools, glinting ominously. And then she saw it. A large, complex device, resembling some kind of intricate scientific apparatus, sat on a pedestal, its metallic surface reflecting the dim light. It was connected by a series of thick cables to a massive, industrial-looking battery pack. The entire setup radiated an aura of dangerous precision, an alien presence in their otherwise comforting home. Her eyes scanned the room, her breath catching in her throat. On a side table, amidst various technical manuals, she spotted a worn leather-bound journal. Her heart pounded as she reached for it, her fingers trembling as she opened the brittle pages. The handwriting was unmistakably Arthur's, neat and precise, but the content was anything but familiar. It was filled with cryptic notations, complex equations, and sketches of human anatomy, interspersed with chillingly detached observations about neural pathways and memory reconstruction. There were references to Project Chimera and the subject's recalcitrance, phrases that sent shivers down her spine. A wave of nausea washed over her as she realized the horrifying implication of what she was reading. This wasn't research for an architectural project. This was something far more invasive, far more unethical. Just as a particularly disturbing passage about synaptic manipulation caught her eye, a sudden, sharp creak from the stairs downstairs shattered the eerie silence. Arthur. He was home early. Panic seized Eleanor, her mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. She slammed the journal shut, her hands fumbling to replace it exactly where she had found it. Her eyes darted around the room, frantically searching for a way to restore everything to its original state. The attic door, still ajar, mocked her with its telltale betrayal. She knew she didn't have time to lock it again, to reset the fishing line. Her only option was to disappear, to make it seem as if she had never been there. As the footsteps on the main staircase grew louder, Eleanor, with a desperate surge of adrenaline, flung herself behind a stack of what looked like old, discarded computer monitors, praying that the shadows would conceal her. The metallic tang in the air, once merely unpleasant, now felt suffocating, a silent testament to the monstrous secret that had been festering in their attic, nurtured by the man she had loved and trusted above all others. The footsteps drew closer, each thud a hammer blow against Eleanor's racing heart. She pressed herself against the cold, metallic surface of the discarded monitors, her breath held captive in her lungs, every nerve ending screaming with terror. She heard Arthur's heavy sigh as he reached the landing, followed by the faint rustle of his clothes. Then, the distinct, sickening sound of the attic door closing. Not just closing, but locking, the click echoing in the sudden, profound silence. He hadn't seen her. Or had he? The uncertainty was a torment in itself. Trapped, hidden, Eleanor listened as Arthur moved about the attic, the low hum of the machinery resuming its unsettling melody. She could hear the clink of tools, the rustle of papers, the low murmur of his voice, sometimes speaking to himself, sometimes to someone, or something, she couldn't see. The horror of her discovery solidified into a chilling certainty. Her husband, the man she adored, was entangled in something monstrous, something beyond her wildest nightmares. Hours crawled by, each minute an eternity of suspended fear. Eleanor's legs ached, her muscles stiff from being held in such a confined, awkward position. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but the thought of food was repulsive. All she could focus on was the terrifying reality of her situation, the precariousness of her hiding place. She heard Arthur leave the attic eventually, the heavy footsteps descending the stairs, the main door opening and closing as he went about his evening routine downstairs. But Eleanor dared not move. The image of the fishing line tripwire flashed in her mind. He was meticulous. He would know if she had moved anything, if she had even breathed too loudly. She waited, listening to the muffled sounds of the house below, until the silence once again descended, heavy and absolute, indicating Arthur had likely retired for the night. Only then, with infinite caution, did Eleanor dare to emerge from her hiding place. Her limbs protested, stiff and numb. The attic, illuminated by the cold moonlight streaming through a small dormer window, looked even more sinister in the dimness. She crept towards the workbench, her eyes fixed on the journal. She had to know more. With trembling hands, she picked it up, her fingers tracing the worn leather. This time, she didn't just skim. She delved into the chilling narrative of Project Chimera. The journal chronicled Arthur's descent into a terrifying obsession. It wasn't about architectural blueprints, it was about building new memories, new identities, rebuilding minds. The entries detailed his groundbreaking, yet utterly depraved, research into memory implantation and neurological restructuring. He believed he had found a way to perfect human consciousness, to erase traumatic experiences, to even instill new personalities. But the horror deepened as Eleanor read further. The subjects of his experiments were not willing participants. They were people he had chosen, people who had disappeared without a trace from their quiet suburban lives. The headaches he had complained about, the strange metallic smell, they weren't symptoms of illness, but side effects of his intense work, the residue of his horrific experiments. Then came the entry that shattered Eleanor's world into a million irreparable pieces. A detailed account, dated just a few months after their wedding, of his first successful memory reconstruction. The subject, referred to only as Subject Delta, had exhibited initial resistance, but eventually succumbed to the process. Arthur meticulously described how he had carefully dismantled the subject's past, replacing painful memories with fabricated ones, crafting a new reality. As Eleanor's eyes scanned the page, her gaze fell upon a photograph tucked into the journal. A faded, sepia-toned image of a young woman, her face radiant with happiness, standing beside a man whose arm was affectionately wrapped around her. The woman in the photograph was unmistakably Eleanor. And the man? It wasn't Arthur. It was a man she vaguely recognized from old community photos, a kind-faced high school teacher who had vanished years ago, leaving behind a heartbroken family. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The man in the photograph was her first husband, Daniel, who she had been told had died tragically in a car accident years before she met Arthur. But the journal entries, the dates, the meticulous details, painted a different, infinitely more terrifying picture. Arthur hadn't just met her and fallen in love. He had found her, identified her trauma, and then systematically erased her past, replacing it with a fabricated narrative where Daniel had died and Arthur was her savior, her destined love. He had been reconstructing her memories, turning her into Subject Delta, a living, breathing testament to his perverse genius. The accident, the subsequent grief, her eventual recovery and meeting Arthur, it was all a meticulously crafted lie, a cruel, elaborate stage play designed to ensnare her. She wasn't Eleanor Vance, the strong, independent woman who had found love again. She was a puppet, her strings pulled by the madman who slept in the bed beside her, a living ghost haunted by a past that was stolen, not lost. A choked sob escaped her lips, the sound tearing through the oppressive silence of the attic. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the dusty floorboards, the journal clattering from her numb fingers. The metallic hum of the machinery, once an unsettling background noise, now seemed to mock her, a constant reminder of the torture she had unknowingly endured. The realization was a tsunami, washing away every foundation of her existence. Her love for Arthur, their shared life, their dreams, it was all a grotesque fabrication. She was living a lie, a carefully constructed illusion, her very identity a product of his twisted machinations. Just as the full weight of this monstrous truth threatened to crush her, her eyes caught sight of something else, glinting beneath a pile of discarded blueprints. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched as if in flight. It was identical to one her grandmother had given her when she was a little girl, a cherished keepsake she had thought lost in the chaos of her accident. A memory, raw and visceral, flickered in her mind, a memory of Daniel, laughing as he helped her hang the bird on their Christmas tree, a memory that had been buried deep, violently suppressed. The bird, a tangible link to her true past, was a stark contradiction to Arthur's narrative, a tiny, defiant beacon of truth in the vast ocean of his lies. But before she could fully grasp this new fragment of her stolen life, a sound, distinct and unmistakable, echoed from downstairs. The creak of the bedroom door. He was awake. He was coming. Eleanor's blood ran cold. He would know she had been here. He would know she had discovered his monstrous secret. And then, he would surely stop at nothing to silence her, to protect his twisted creation, to maintain the illusion he had so painstakingly constructed. The attic door, which had been locked from the inside, now felt like the entrance to her tomb, not a sanctuary. She was no longer just a victim of a cruel deception. She was now a target, trapped in the very house that had become her prison, with a monster masquerading as her loving husband. The creak of the bedroom door downstairs was a death knell, echoing the finality of Eleanor's shattered reality. Every fiber of her being screamed for escape, but where could she go? The attic, once a symbol of forgotten memories, was now a cage, its walls closing in with the horrifying truth. She clutched the wooden bird, its smooth surface offering a strange, desperate comfort. This tiny object, a beacon from a stolen past, ignited a fierce, desperate ember of defiance within her. She wouldn't just disappear. She wouldn't become another forgotten subject in Arthur's grotesque experiments. Footsteps ascended the attic stairs, slow and deliberate, each one a drumbeat of impending doom. Eleanor's breath hitched. She had mere seconds. Her eyes frantically scanned the meticulously organized chaos of Arthur's lab. Her gaze fell upon the large, industrial battery pack, connected by thick cables to the memory reconstruction device. A desperate, reckless plan, born of pure adrenaline and primal fear, began to form in her mind. It was a long shot, a gamble with her very life, but it was the only shot she had. As the doorknob began to turn, a soft, metallic click, Eleanor lunged. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she seized one of the thick cables connecting the device to the battery pack. Her fingers fumbled, slick with sweat, but driven by a primal need for survival, she pulled. The cable ripped free with a shower of sparks, plunging the attic into a sudden, disorienting darkness. A high-pitched, wailing alarm immediately pierced the air, a cacophony of sound that threatened to shatter her eardrums. "Eleanor!" Arthur's voice, a snarl of pure rage, erupted from the doorway. He was there, a shadowy figure silhouetted against the faint light from the landing. The alarm continued to shriek, a desperate cry in the oppressive blackness. Eleanor, fueled by terror and a burning desire for retribution, didn't hesitate. She threw the disconnected cable towards the device, hoping to cause further damage, to buy herself precious seconds. She heard a furious grunt, a crash as Arthur stumbled, perhaps hit by the flailing cable, perhaps by some piece of equipment. In the confusion, Eleanor moved. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get out. Her hands blindly searched for an exit, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She stumbled over something metallic, then felt the rough wood of the attic door frame. With a desperate shove, she pushed herself through the doorway, tumbling down the first few steps of the narrow staircase. The fall was jarring, but the pain was a distant concern. All that mattered was escaping the monster she had once called husband. She heard Arthur behind her, bellowing her name, his footsteps thundering down the stairs in pursuit. But Eleanor, propelled by a newfound clarity and an unbreakable will to survive, was faster. She reached the bottom, her legs screaming in protest, and burst out into the hallway. The main door, her salvation, was just ahead. With one last, desperate surge of energy, she flung herself towards it, tearing it open and spilling out into the cool night air. The piercing shriek of the attic alarm faded behind her, replaced by the symphony of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the wind. She ran, not looking back, the wooden bird still clutched tightly in her hand, a tangible link to the truth that had been buried and reborn. Eleanor Vance, or rather, the true Eleanor, the woman whose memories had been stolen and twisted, never returned to that house. The authorities, alerted by a neighbor who heard the frantic alarm and Eleanor's desperate cries, found Arthur Vance in the attic, surrounded by the remnants of his monstrous Project Chimera. He was disoriented, babbling incoherently about neural pathways and memory reconstruction, his grand ambition crumbling around him. The evidence Eleanor had uncovered, the journal, the machinery, the missing persons reports, it all painted a chilling picture of a man driven to the brink of madness by his own twisted genius. The revelations sent shockwaves through the quiet community, exposing a darkness that had festered beneath a veneer of suburban normalcy. The truth, in all its horrific detail, slowly emerged. Arthur Vance, a brilliant but deeply disturbed individual, had indeed orchestrated the deaths and disappearances of several people, including Eleanor's first husband, Daniel, all in the pursuit of his deranged experiments. He had manipulated memories, built false realities, all to satisfy his insatiable need for control and his twisted vision of a perfected human consciousness. Eleanor, a survivor of unimaginable psychological trauma, embarked on a long and arduous journey of healing and rediscovery. The wooden bird became her talisman, a reminder of the past that had been stolen but ultimately reclaimed. She sought therapy, piecing together fragments of her true memories, slowly reconstructing the woman she was meant to be, not the one Arthur had created. She found solace in unexpected places, in the kindness of strangers, in the unwavering support of old friends who recognized the spark of the original Eleanor, even through the haze of the fabricated past. She became an advocate for victims of psychological manipulation, her story a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the insidious nature of control. The house with the locked attic door stood vacant for years, a silent monument to the family secrets it held. No one dared to live there, haunted by the whispers of the past, the chilling tale of the door that was locked from the inside, not to keep things out, but to keep a monstrous truth contained. It served as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers lie not in the shadows beyond our walls, but in the darkness that can fester within the very hearts we choose to trust. The scars Eleanor carried were deep, etched into her soul, but they were also a testament to her strength, a reminder that even when everything is taken, the truth, eventually, will always find its way out. And that, my friends, is the chilling tale of the attic door locked from the inside. It's a story that reminds us to look beyond the surface, to question what we think we know, and to never underestimate the power of the human mind, both for creation and for unimaginable destruction. If this story resonated with you, if it sent shivers down your spine, please give this video a like. And if you want to uncover more unsettling truths and explore the darker corners of human nature with us, make sure to subscribe to Family Secrets Unveiled and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the shadows. We have many more stories waiting to be unearthed.